summer movie season has began a little earlier. It's actually still spring.
Yeah.
But Marvel continues to expand their cinematic universe and have done so in a very big way with their newest film in the Phase 2 of Marvel Cinemas. This is the Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and that's the topic for this episode of The Real Deal. Welcome back to The Man Attic. I'm Kevin Polly.
And I'm Brian Hatcher.
And of course, we're going to take a look at what may be, for me, the best Marvel film yet, possibly even my favorite comic book film of all time as far as the depiction of a comic book in motion, and that is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Now, Brian, this is one of those movies, you and I have seen it. I've seen it now 3 times. This is a movie that, to me, is just beyond what you think of when you think of a comic book film.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Marvel, I think they picked a very good character to kind of branch out in their definition of a comic book movie, because Captain America, he doesn't have this outlandish set of powers, you know?
Right.
So you can really kind of expand on that universe and explore some other things and go along, you know, and learn a lot more about the world, and even make some changes, some major changes to the world, you know, and kind of change the rules a little bit. But I really did enjoy this film because it is really that throwback to the 1970s intrigue movies.
And we'd heard so much of that, you know, from people behind the scenes. But, you know, when you finally saw it, you were like, okay, I get it.
Oh, yeah.
I know exactly where they're going with this.
Oh, yeah. Definitely a lot of that Manchurian Candidate feel to it, you know.
It definitely has that sort of
paranoia.
That paranoia, yeah. And in the 70s cinema, that's one of the things I loved about it. And it definitely has that vibe. And to be honest, that paranoia makes so much sense when you think about current status of the world. And the idea of, you know, that we have these drones that can just autonomously take people out, that we have, you know, the NSA listening in on everybody's phone calls and checking on emails and tweets and Facebook. I mean, it really does a good job of kind of taking those 70s sensibilities in filmmaking and making them work in a more modern setting, while still being a comic book film. It never forgets that part of its essence.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I have to say that if you're going to have that type of a world, probably the best commentator you can put in the middle of it is an idealist like Captain America.
And I think, to me, that's where the film really has its heart. You know, because Steve Rogers, and it's one of the things that I think Chris Evans has done so well with the character, and even more so in this film than in the Avengers. And that's he really shows us that sort of man out of time, that fish out of water, and how he's trying to adapt. And that's what I love about Steve Rogers. He doesn't quit.
Yeah.
He adapts, but he still stays true to who he is.
Exactly.
You know, there are scenes I love when Nick Fury's telling him about, you know, you need to really get with the program, that this is how things are. And he's like, don't bet on it.
Yeah.
I love that, because it reminds me of Cap, and if you're a comic book fan, especially if you're a Marvel geek, then you know the Civil War storyline.
Right.
And Captain America takes the side that no one expects him to take, which is the one that's against the government.
Right.
Because the government is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Right. And you see that version of Cap in this movie. There's just so much going on, and I think that's what's so great about this movie is it's a very layered, multifaceted script. There's a lot going on here besides just comic book film.
Right, and I would certainly agree with you there. And what's really wonderful, as far as the script is concerned, for me, is that, you know, there's a word that gets thrown around in comic book movies now, which is dark. You know,
yes.
We want our movie to be darker. You know, and to be honest, I mean, there's a lot of heavy things that happen in this film, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a dark film.
No, I think serious is more the word,
yes.
But that's not a bad thing. It's still a comic book movie. I mean, you still see Captain America doing friggin' amazing things, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Right.
But I mean, you still see the comic book, you know, texture of this film. I mean, it's shot like, I mean, you can see panels sometimes the way the thing's shot. But it allows itself to take its subject more seriously, but never changing the fact that its subject is a comic book.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to have, you know, brooding, dark moments. And don't get me wrong, I love Batman, and Batman is that character. But it's one of the faults you know I've talked about with Man of Steel.
Yeah.
Is Superman should never be a brooding character. It should never be a brooding film. It should be inspirational. And you see that with Cap in this film. Cap is an inspirational character.
Yeah.
You know, I love the fact that in this world where he's been returned, that there's a Smithsonian exhibit about him. Because that would happen in reality.
Absolutely.
And everything in that Smithsonian exhibit is just, it's exactly why we love Cap.
Yeah.
You know?
And you know, the thing is, yes, Cap is a Boy Scout, but you know what? They own that. You know, and they're not scared of that. And in this movie, that's the perfect character to put into this world, you know, and it just works. It just absolutely works. And I mean, all the characters are wonderful in this film.
Well, to me, the film really shines on a couple of different levels, and we'll kind of hit on, you know, just kind of quickly here, because we don't really want to give too much away from the storyline, because it's such a great storyline that you need to discover. And to be honest, this is one of those do not wait for home video.
Oh, absolutely.
You need to see it on a big screen. You don't need to see it in 3D, and I've seen it in both 3D and 2D, so I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah.
The 3D's not bad. And I'm sure on the home market it'll be much better. Mm-hmm. But in the cinemas, just go for 2D because you don't need it. Trust me, it's as in your face as you need it to be. And the characters are really what really make this film work. To me, Chris Evans has really come to own the role of Steve Rogers like Downey Jr. owns Iron Man. Mm-hmm. In that mindset, you just can't imagine anyone else playing him now. And I mean, not only because Chris Evans is, I mean, as a specimen, and I think he even gets referred to as a specimen at one point by the Apple Store guy.
Yeah.
He looks like Steve Rogers. I mean, he looks like a dude who could knock you off a boat, who could knock you through a wall, and not break a sweat. But he also remembers the earnestness of the character.
Right.
It would be so easy to make Cap a one-dimensional character.
Oh, yeah.
And in comics it even happens sometimes. But Evans never lets that be the case. There's something going on behind those eyes every time you see him.
Oh,
and whether you see him in soldier mode, where he is like the biggest ass kicker in the world. I mean, like, that dude does some amazing stuff in this movie. And as a friend of mine said, once you see this movie, in the Marvel Universe, there is no cooler thing than Captain America's shield now. It is it is the coolest thing ever in this movie. And they make it work so convincingly. You know, but Steve Rogers is, you know, he is that man of time. I love the little things they do with him. The little notebook that just has all these things he still needs to check out. You know, Nirvana, ? Band. You know, it's like Star Trek, Star Wars. You know, it's just... I love this idea that we're seeing him adapt, because that's what Steve Rogers does. He doesn't give up. He doesn't whine about his fate. He adapts. He's ready for the next mission. But he's also trying to find that stuff to do when he's not in a mission. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what this film does a good job. It allows us to see him. It allows us to see Black Widow. Mm-hmm. You know, of course, Falcon, who we'll talk about in a minute. We see them, what they're doing when the costumes come off.
Right.
And that, to me, is really important. It allows us to see them as real people. And I think for those who are not strong comic book fans, but still like these movies, it's one of the reasons we like them, because we see them as characters. We see them as people.
Absolutely. And, you know, and there's such great characterization in here. I mean, Black Widow gets to kind of step to the forefront. You get to learn more about her.
You start to see that she may not be the stone cold assassin that sometimes we think she is.
Right.
There are some lines, like one of my favorite lines she has is, you know, and again, this isn't really a spoiler, but, you know, I just pretend that I know what's always going on.
Exactly.
And it's a great line because it really does say a lot about her. And I really dug that. And then you have, of course, I think, you know, boy, who really comes to step up in this game is Anthony Mackie as Falcon.
Oh, yes.
And I've been a huge fan of his for the longest time. Being a Marshall grad, of course, We Are Marshall is a movie I take very seriously. And his portrayal of Nate Ruffin, I mean, was Oscar-worthy as far as I'm concerned. And then you see him in The Hurt Locker. So now we know that Falcon and Hawkeye have hung out before in The Hurt Locker. But, you know, he never falls into the trap of being just the sidekick.
Oh, absolutely.
Just like Black Widow doesn't either. They are team. You know, they're team members. They are part of something bigger, and each of them has an important part to play. And if it doesn't happen, then the day is not saved.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you one thing. We're talking about characterization. One of the things that I think is really great about The Winter Soldier is that a big criticism that a lot of superhero movies get is that there aren't a lot of strong female characters, and in this movie,
you got multiple.
You have 3.
Yeah.
You know, Black Widow steps up, but we got Agent 13.
Yeah, and how cool to see her in this film. You got Maria Hill as well.
Exactly.
And then you've also still got that flashback to Peggy Carter, who was so awesome in the first Avenger. So you've actually got 4 really strong female characters in there.
Yeah.
And all of them are great. I mean, they're just great characters. And, you know, Maria Hill really gets to step up in this film. She didn't have a lot to do in the Avengers, and that was a criticism a lot of people had. She gets some really cool moments, and that's again where this film works, much like the Avengers did, is everybody has those chances to shine. I will say this, I mean, Black Widow has some amazing scenes in this.
Oh, yeah.
But when you see Falcon take flight. I
Ah.
mean, it is like looking at a live action comic book, and I think
yeah.
that's where the biggest stuff comes. You know, we would definitely be doing a disservice if we didn't mention Robert Redford as Alexander Pierce.
Oh yeah.
You know, when I heard his name attached to this film, as a Captain America fan, my geek meter went way up, because I'm
Yeah.
like, if they're bringing in Redford, who, let's be honest, if these films were made in the 70s, he probably would be Steve Rogers.
Oh, absolutely.
He probably would have been cast as Captain America. Because he had those looks, he had that style. And to see him in this movie, and to see him not phone it in, to see him really embrace
Yeah.
what's going on in this universe. I was just so excited every time he was on screen.
Absolutely. Well, again, we go back to serious. They take the subject matter seriously, and I think when a superhero movie fails, it's ultimately because they're winking at the screen, going, "Yes, we know it's a superhero movie," but you know, Marvel doesn't do. Their movies don't do that. They take the stuff seriously,
Sure.
and you know, and the Winter Soldier, and again, talking about characterization, the Winter Soldier.
Oh, he's like the Terminator
Wow.
of the Marvel Universe. It's just there's so much good stuff going on in this movie. And again, the Winter Soldier, I love the fact that he is truly a scary character.
Yeah.
I mean, he is every bit as powerful as Captain America. And the other thing I'll say about this film, the fight scenes. You feel the weight of those punches and kicks. I mean, you really feel like these are super powered beings, like punching each other through. I mean, the opening boat sequence alone makes Captain America the most badass man on the planet. I mean, you just aren't gonna mess with that dude anymore when you see this film. So, what were your thoughts about Captain America: The Winter Soldier? Have you seen it yet? And if so, did you like it, love it, hate it? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget, of course, you can always follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Google+. We'll have links to all of that below. And as far as we're concerned, you know, again, I may be one to make the comment here that The Winter Soldier may be my favorite comic book movie of all time. And it's not that I'm saying it's like the best as far as like, because you know, I grew up with Superman 2, and then of course you got the Batman films from '89 and '92. You know, you've got, I don't talk about Batman and Robin or Batman Forever. Of course you've got all the other Marvel films, and believe me, I mean, I was geeked out of my mind at the Avengers. But there's just something about this film that it's sort of a more sophisticated comic book movie, and I think that's what really draws me to it. And that to me is what I would say would be, if I ultimately decide that it is number one, and I'm still deciding on it, that will probably be what sends it over for me. So you know, let us know in the thoughts below not only what you thought of The Winter Soldier, but what's your favorite comic book movie or superhero movie? We'd love to hear it. Hatcher, your thoughts on The Winter Soldier as we wrap up?
Oh well, definitely. It's a wonderful film, I think, to start out this redefinition of what you can call a superhero movie. I mean, they're certainly expanding the universe. It's going out into space.
With Guardians of the Galaxy,
And we're gonna see maybe a more comedic movie there. Phase 3, we may be getting into the mystical arts.
I can only hope, because there is some name dropping in this film. I'm not going to say any more than that.
Yeah.
That makes me believe we could be seeing our trip to the realm of the fantastic in Phase 3.
Oh, absolutely.
And of course, at the end, you'll see that Captain America will return in the Avengers: Age of Ultron. So you know, we've got that to look forward to next year. This is definitely Marvel's summer. Between Captain America, you've also got soon the launch of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, X-Men Days of Future Past, and of course Guardians of the Galaxy. So a great summer for superhero flicks. Get out there and see them. And of course, we've got a very busy summer ahead of us here on The Real Deal. So stick with us. Again, be a part of the conversation, and feel free to join us back here in the Man Attic anytime you want. We'll have more reviews coming your way, as well as some outside of the box type stuff as far as film deconstructions and things like that too. So it's going to be a very fun summer for us as well. We'll look forward to seeing you there. Until next time, the Man Attic is now closed, to coin a phrase. I'm Kevin Polly.
And I'm Brian Hatcher.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Real Deal.